Welcome to Gen Z Money, episode 40.
The biggest difference is that, and if you've ever tried to go to talk to maybe a financial advisor or somebody like that, you know that they have minimums. So the first thing I would do is qualify you and say, well, how much do you have? And if you did not have usually a minimum of $250,000 upwards, we're not going to have a long conversation because, you're paid on the funds that are being brought into the institution. So that is a big reason why I also started coaching, is because I felt like folks who were ready to get started but didn't have that amount of money, you don't have a whole lot of options about where to go.
Even if my jokes aren't funny, my tongue tied up on it, and I don't need to speak a single word, 'cause you got me holding.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Gen Z Money Podcast, where we turn financial peace to your reality. I'm your host, James Spelman. I'm still in the studio, as you guys can see, adding a couple little razzle-dazzle things. Before we get into the interview, I just want to let you guys know, if you're watching on YouTube, of course, this interview was scheduled before I created the studio, so I'll still have the old background, but this is what it's going to be going forward. Got my little sign up there. Everything looks good, man. It came out awesome. So I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in. But this show is not about me, guys. This show is about Genevieve. She's from the Holistic Personal Finance. She's a financial coach. And she joins me today to not only tell her money story, but to also provide so many great tips for you guys on saving money and investing and things like that. So I really hope you guys enjoy. If you guys do enjoy, you guys can always reach out to her. I have all of her contact information down in the show notes. But if you guys like the interview, reach out to her, let her know what you guys think. But if you guys haven't, also, if you guys would leave a review on the podcast after you listen to it, it truly, truly helps get the podcast out to other people who may need it more than you do. But that's my spiel for this interview, guys. Let's go ahead and get right into episode 40. What's going on, Genevieve? Welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, the pleasure is truly, truly all mine. I appreciate you taking the time out of your, I'm sure, very busy day going into this weekend to have this conversation and to come on and to share your story with my listeners.
Yeah, no, again, just happy to be here. And this, talking about money is something that is so important. So kudos to you for starting some of these conversations, and excited to make them a little bit more normalized.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. We have to normalize it, and we have to share every money story. That way someone can relate to something. But let's start with your money story. Let's go back to little Genevieve. Let's go.
Oh boy.
10 years old, 9 years old, 5th grade, 4th grade, around that time. How was money talked about and viewed in your household as you grew up?
Yeah, so we're going back a long time. So just so you know. But I would say growing up, so I grew up in kind of middle of nowhere, Florida, and grew up in a great household. So, money was definitely tied to work. So when I think about some of those like money scripts that I have that I developed when I was a kid, it was always tied to you work hard, you're going to earn more. And I think part of that was because my dad owned his own business, right? And we all know, if you even like have a side hustle, or if you are a small business owner, it's like all on you. You got to put in those hours. So I think because he had that just like entrepreneurship, like small business mentality, he was putting in all those hours. And I definitely started to equate that to kind of like long hours equal making more money, and kind of how to find that success.
Okay, so, well, that's a great first question to ask. Do you think that, at least now with all the things you've learned, do you think that working more equates to building wealth faster.
Absolutely not. And this was one of like the biggest myths I personally had to let go of as an adult. And so I would say up until maybe 5-ish years ago, I really did hold on to this, like, I have to be the best at work. I have to climb the corporate ladder. I have to be the first one in the office and spend nights at the office to like prove that I am working hard, and I have to go above and beyond and do everything myself. And I had a lot of that working in a corporate environment. And what's really funny is that once I kind of let go of that and I realized, like, dude, your job is not your whole entire life, and there are other ways to make this income, right? We can invest and we can multiply our money that way. We can invest in ourselves and our education and increase our income that way. We can invest in other businesses or side hustles, and there are very easy ways to make money that way as well. And once I kind of started learning a lot of these lessons and reading more about the psychology of personal finance and learning more about that side of it, I found jobs that would pay me more and I'd have less stress. And so now I still work 9 to 5 in a corporate environment, but it's doing something that I really enjoy with a team that I really enjoy, and paying more money than I've made in the corporate world in my career. So yeah, isn't that funny?
It's so crazy because it's like you're not the only one that kind of grew up thinking like, look, as long as I work the hardest out of everyone else, I'm going to make the most money. And in some cases that may be true, but in majority of the cases, it's more about working smarter, not harder. And so that's why a lot of times people will get jobs, especially in, like, you see it in corporate America, where the higher up you go, the easier the work gets, but the more money you make. And it could be for several things. It could be because you got better at your job and things like that. But it's still the case nevertheless. But then you talk about making your money work for you. And I think that's another big part of this personal finance that, we're trying to reach out as content creators to teach people, like, listen, you don't need to be the only one in your household working. Every dollar that you have needs to also be working and also needs a job. So seeing your father as an entrepreneur, was he bringing you into the business finances portion? Were they really talking to you about money, or did you just kind of see like hard work equals a good life?
I think I really saw it from that end. Now, I will say I saw it more on a personal note. I started working actually in my dad's office when I was a kid. So maybe 13, I would go in and file papers or take notes. My dad has terrible penmanship. So I would always like write out all of his notes and do all the typing. So I did get this sense, and my parents were really committed to, you need to learn that discipline early in life as a kid. And so I was always the one that, I would sometimes have to stay home instead of going out with friends because I had to do cleaning or I had to do chores. It was definitely that lesson over and over again. And I do remember a few things, some big milestones that my dad hit in his business that he shared with us as a family. And that was really exciting when he had some like really big successful years. That was something that we all celebrated as a family, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that they not only that they started working you at 13, because I think that is, a lot of people may think, oh, that is child abuse. No, like
it was good lessons.
Yeah, I mean, the building a great work ethic at such a young age is, I think, one of the biggest indicators of how successful someone's going to be later in life. So, and it's great that they shared those big milestones, especially in the business, because you probably at that young age of 13, you probably didn't realize truly how hard business is, how hard having a successful business is. Now looking back, you're like, this guy was a trooper.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And started from our house, like in the guest room and, seeing the growth of like eventually having your own office and having a staff and yeah. And one good lesson, I always think this is so funny. I actually asked for my first raise from my dad. So I remember I was doing like, so he's an engineer. So I was doing like some draft work and then his secretary went out on maternity leave. And he's like, well, why don't you just do all the secretary stuff too? So I was like, oh, okay. So I started doing all of that stuff. And I came home to my mom one day. I said, Mom, I said, I'm like exhausted. I was like, Dad's having me do 2 jobs. And she goes, well, she's like, have you asked him for a raise? If you're doing 2 jobs, you probably need more money. And I was like, I didn't even know that was an option. So that was a good learning lesson in, hey, if you are doing more work, you got to be paid more. And I have definitely used that to my advantage over the years and not being quite as afraid and asking for extra money and asking for that raise every year.
Yeah, and looking back, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? More responsibility should equate to more compensation. But I'm just going to ask, just to satisfy my curiosity, you probably don't remember, but how did that like, what age were you and how did that conversation go? Because it's much different talking to your dad than, of course, an outside boss. So do you remember even how you approached that conversation?
Yeah, I was probably like 15 or 16. And my mom definitely gave me the confidence to ask because I think and my dad is not an intimidating person at all. I think I was just, I don't know, it's just a weird thing to talk about. Right. And she was like, okay, now you're going to go in there. This is what you're going to say. And you're going to, say if I'm doing 2 of these jobs, I need to be, earning, oh gosh, I think at that point in time, maybe it was like $9 an hour, but it was a long time ago. That was probably when I was 15 or 16.
That's I think that's such another amazing life lesson to learn at such young ages, negotiating wages. Now, I mean, going in there and say, hey, I want more money. That might not be the best way, but again, it's your dad, right? So it's like you can make a little bit of mistakes, and he might have a little sympathy for you and say,
Yeah,
"Okay, Jim."
I definitely remember him saying like, okay, you have a good point there. He was helping me through it a little bit, but it was a really good life lesson.
That's so awesome. It's so exciting to hear that you started all of this working at such a young age, learning how to negotiate wages, and even learning these skills that you're learning doing a secretary's job and doing, all of
Oh
the
yeah.
little things. So like you're getting all of these skills at such a young age and you're building a work ethic and it's awesome to see. So let's transition a little bit more. So let's go around 17 to 18 range. You're probably graduating high school, maybe going to college. What did that transition look like for you?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, again, so long ago. So I went to like a state college. I had some scholarships. I was very fortunate that, between what my parents had saved up and the scholarships that I got, I did not have to take out any student loans for undergrad. So it was a big blessing, but I still did work. So, I worked like a retail job and I worked usually anywhere from like 20 and 30 hours a week, on top of school. And so, because probably I had been working while going to high school and working for my dad and doing that kind of thing as a teenager, it was a pretty easy transition into college. Um, I would say the one thing that changed in college was the temptation to spend more. So, in high school, you're definitely not, you won't really go that many places, right? So you're not really spending the same amount of money. In college, you have a little bit more of that freedom. You get introduced to credit cards. They don't do this anymore, but this was back in the day where they would give you a free t-shirt for a credit card and you were like, oh my gosh, this is a great deal, right? So it definitely got sucked into that a little bit, more than I wish I had, but it was all good learning lessons.
Yeah, I think that that's awesome to hit on the fact that you were able to with scholarships and of course your parents' hard work, because I kind of don't like the whole my parents paid for school thing. Like, no, your parents worked hard, they
Oh
saved the
yeah.
money, and
Mm-hmm.
so that is nothing to look down on. And a lot of people say, oh, Genevieve is so privileged. No, her parents worked harder than yours. Sorry. Anyways, so you managed to graduate with no student loan debt,
Mm-hmm.
and you were already working through high school. So it was not a very bizarre concept for you to say, I'm probably going to work through college too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
it all just made sense. And honestly, it is nice to, I think I got used to the fact that I did have, not that it was a ton, but I did have some spending money that was my own. And I actually really like that. So I got used to being, having a little bit of independence from an early age, I guess.
yeah, I just think that the point I really want to hit on is, those who do have children that are maybe listening to this that might be going into college, it's like working while you're in college really isn't, it's not as hard as people may think. Yeah, you might not get to go out and play beer pong on the weekends. Yeah, you might have to miss the movie that you were going to go see, but you have to make sacrifices. But the freedom that comes along with it and the lessons you learn are going to outweigh that. Now, trying to convince a college student of that is a little is another hand, which I have no experience with. But
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that I probably learned just as much working as I did in actual classes because, I worked a retail job, which is nothing fancy, but I learned about sales and how to sell stuff. I learned about inventory and the cost of the store and the finances of the store and I don't know, learn leadership skills and how to lead others and how to train other people. If somebody new came in, I would have to teach them something. Like that's a whole new skill. So honestly, I think working during college is you're going to learn just as much, if not more, than the classes that you're actually taking because you're putting all that stuff into practice.
and the number one thing that college students complain that they don't have that employers want is experience. And that's what you're getting. I think that is probably the most important thing that you will get out of working, especially if you can get into the same field that you want to go into after college. If you can do that while in college, I mean, the amount of a head start that you'll get over your peers is, I think, uncomparable.
Yeah, and all of that, all of that experience is transferable. So, I started out in retail and I ended up moving into finance, but I still use a lot of those skills that I started, leadership skills, teaching other people new things, and coaching. I use a lot of those skills. So it's funny, they all kind of overlap eventually. They build on each other.
Gotcha. So you kind of just teased into what you went to college for, which is, I assume, finances. Is that right?
It was business overall. So I did a major in marketing. And when I came out of college, I did more of sales for a really long time, which is a great start to a career, in my opinion. It's a lot of soft skills, but it's, you have to have some perseverance, you have to hear no a lot. And usually the salaries are pretty good too. So kind of a win-win.
Okay, so you got your degree in business.
Mhm.
What was your intentions? What did you want to do with that degree? What was your
I Yeah,
perspective?
I originally wanted to kind of stick in retail, to be honest, like to go but more in the business end of it. So doing more buying and merchandising and things like that. So it kind of like just fell into honestly a different type of sales job because the money was good. And I was like, oh, this sounds good and I can do that. um and then eventually I hopped around. So my first job was right before the Great Recession, and I got laid off during the Great Recession. So I can relate to a lot of folks who, as we're kind of gearing up for a potential recession, I don't know if it'll end up that way, but I know a lot of folks are kind of, gearing up for that and kind of living through it, I can definitely relate how nerve-wracking that was, because we were in a place where our company was just laying off people week after week, and eventually it got up to me. Um, so yeah, definitely took a non-conventional route after that happened, and kind of beat bopped around uh, jobs for a few years until I fell into finance.
Gotcha. And so for
Mhm.
those who do not realize what great recession she's talking about, I'm sorry, I just got braces in, so I'm like fumbling my words.
It's okay.
For those who do not know what the Great Recession she's talking about, I believe it's 2008 you're referring
Mhm.
to.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's like the greatest one I think I lived through so far. So, okay. And then what did your finances look like at this time? As you graduate, you go into the sales area, the retail area. What will your finances look like? Were you really focused on your finance? Were you kind of just bebopping along, or how was that looking?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get like a pretty good starting salary, so I wasn't overly concerned. I was generally spending less than I made. So, I kind of was like, okay, I'm spending a little bit less than I make. I put a little bit in savings. Of course, looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have maxed out that 401k a little bit more, or added more into investing. Um, and I had a little bit that was going into a 401k, but didn't know much about it. I don't even know what it was invested in at that time. So I was kind of just doing the bare minimum, not and trying not to go into credit card debt, and save a little, and, put a little bit in my 401k. And I felt like that was enough. Like I didn't need to do any more, which is a big misconception looking back. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said something is like you're doing the bare minimum, but let's be honest, Genevieve, the fact that you were living on less than you made, you were already doing better than the average person, right? So I don't want to minimize that. Where did you learn this concept? Was this something that you were brought up on in your childhood? Because a lot of people may look like, okay, look, as long as I have money in my account, I am good, right?
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. How did you learn the concept of living less you make? And now that I'm asking that question, it kind of sounds like a common sense question, like James, that's common sense. But do you have anything for that? I'm sorry, that's a bad question.
No, I mean, I think honestly, it just still came from my parents, who instilled, not like we went great into in-depth financial conversations, but I think they did really do a good job of covering the basics. They did a good job of trying to hammer in, like, try to stay away from those credit cards. They helped me out with some credit card debt, kind of mid-college range. And I think they kind of put they kind of put like the fear of God in me, and were like, we're helping you out this one time and that's it. And they have stuck to that rule, because they never helped me out again after that. That was the last favor I ever got. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're in an okay. I think that's a pretty okay financial position.
Yeah.
You're living on less
Yeah.
than you make. You probably have a little
I
bit of
felt
savings.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt
Well,
good at the time until I
until you
lost
got
my
laid off. Yeah.
job.
So let's talk about that, right? So you get laid off, like you're in an okay position. You're not like straddled with so much student loan debt, credit card debt, and stuff like that. And then you transition into finances. What made you make that transition?
So at the time, kind of in between, I would say there's maybe 2 to 3 years kind of in between that, where it was a great recession, right? So it took me a long time to find another job, and move and do a couple of things in between then. But I was actually working a really crappy job. So I was working this terrible job at an airport. I would literally cry going into work. And I knew I had to find something different. And a girlfriend of mine, had worked at a bank, and she's like, you know what? She's like, have you ever thought about like working in a bank or doing finance stuff? She's like, we kind of use some of the same, customer service, sales, leadership skills that we had back when we worked in retail. And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, I never thought about it, but let me give it a go. I don't know much. And I applied and got the job. So that's kind of where it started.
Okay. And so, this kind of leads into how I found you, which is your Instagram page, which is all about finances, right?
Yeah.
It's called the Holistic Personal Finance. And you're a financial wellness coach. But as you know, and as I know, and as the listeners have probably figured out, not all finance is personal finance, right? So, and what I mean by that should probably like there's corporate finance, and then uh there's different levels of finance, but you focus on personal finance now. So how did you why did you even decide to get this started in the first place?
Yeah. So I would say I started, it was a little bit of like a 2020 project, right? So I moved around kind of in the industry for a while. So I started working with people like in a bank. I then moved to kind of more of a wealth management private bank role. And then from there, I really wanted to just do something different and stretch my own skills and kind of build my career. And so I moved into a role more on the internal side of the bank. So I stopped working with clients. And about a year or so after that, COVID hit. And I think I just really missed like that personal connection that I would get when I was working with clients. And so started doing some coaching, and it kind of has just taken off from there and done really well. And I so enjoy it. It's really fun to create these plans for folks. And when I worked kind of in the private bank, it was very much I'm making the plan for the client and I just give the client the plan, and then that's like the exchange, right? But what I do with coaching, it really is more of like a collaboration. So it's like me and the client are really working together to create their plan, and they feel a lot of ownership in it, and they get excited and they can feel a little bit more confident in the decisions that they're making.
Yeah, I love you couldn't have said that any better, because I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, could be completely wrong, the success rate must be much different comparing you making the plan, giving it to them and expecting them to execute, and you guys both developing the plan and them walking through it. How is the success rate different?
Oh, it's incredible. So not only do people see results faster, but they see bigger results. And then not only that, but then they see more sustained results. So, I have clients that I worked with last year that are still coming to me being like, oh, I just, finished paying off that credit card, or I'm continuing to invest, or I bumped up my 401k. You'll be so proud of me. I bumped up my 401k contribution again. And, so this success is, it's more sustainable.
Gotcha. So can we, okay, I want to go into, if you don't mind, like the differences in the process of what you were doing when you're creating plans and giving them to clients versus the actual financial coaching aspect, where it's not just you're giving them a plan, you're sitting down, developing a plan that they know they're going to stick to, and kind of still walking beside them. So let's start with how you used to do it in the private banking space. What would that process look like if I was just a brand new client? Hi, Genevieve, I'm James Bowman, and I'm broke and I want to be rich.
Right.
How does that look like?
First of all, the biggest difference is that, and if you've ever tried to go to talk to maybe a financial advisor or somebody like that, that they have minimums. So the first thing I would do is qualify you and say, well, how much do you have? And if you did not have usually a minimum of $250,000 upwards, we're not going to have a long conversation, because, you're paid on the funds that are being brought into the institution. So that is a big reason why I also started coaching, is because I felt like folks who were ready to get started but didn't have that amount of money, you don't have a whole lot of options about where to go. You can kind of like Google something online. You may be able to like get some like basic advice from your local bank or banker. You may be able to get a little bit of advice from your employer if you have like an employer with a 401k, but usually that advice is not maybe great. And then again, it's advice. So you're not really learning how to do it on your own. You're just like relying on all these different people to kind of do it for you. Or you get brought into a place where they're going to charge you a lot of fees and kind of take advantage of you. So that's another reason why I really started doing this, is because it's way more accessible than your typical financial advisor.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that kind of shocked me to hear.
I saw your face.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
know the listeners might not be able to see it, but
well,
your
well,
face was like, wow.
well, because it just, when you said that, the first thing I thought, and I could be completely wrong. Again, this is why this podcast is so great, because I can be 100% wrong and learn. If someone has the discipline, has the bandwidth to accumulate $250,000 in net worth, what would cause them to then go to a financial advisor? Like, I think at that point, you kind of already learned what works and what doesn't. You would think that the people who need financial advisors the most are those that are below that amount of net worth, of that amount of investable assets. So can you shed some light on even why that?
Yeah. So it's a lot of retirees. So it's a lot of folks who are prepping for retirement, or who are kind of already retired, or folks who have come into funds. So let's say maybe unfortunately somebody passed away and I have some inheritance, or they've come into money of some way, maybe sold a home and made a big profit or something along those lines. So there are some situations where people are coming into money and they're not sure what to do with it. There are other situations where people are getting to retire, which I will say, if you are getting ready to retire, that isn't a bad time to look into a financial advisor. Not all advisors are bad. There are some good ones out there. Unfortunately, the industry gets a really bad rap, because there's a lot of terrible ones, but there are a few good ones out there too. And that is not a bad time to consult with one, because there are a lot of tax implications that you want to be aware of, and different things that there's so many options on the table. You want to make sure you're talking with a professional to make sure you're doing the best that you can.
Gotcha. And so from your opinion, this is just Genevieve talking. This isn't, this is just your opinion. Do you think that the difference in going to a financial coach and the financial advisor is truly, I feel like a financial coach is kind of like that runway where we're getting you up to speed, we're getting you to take off, and then a financial advisor is kind of managing the flight. Does that kind of make sense? Or like, should people be going to financial advisors once they've amassed a portion of wealth to now safely manage? Or do you think that a financial coach can do both? Or what do you think is the balance on that?
Yeah. So usually the benefits of working with an advisor are going to be when you have a more complex system. So, because you're paying them a fee. So, it's expensive. You're paying for the advice. And when you compound that fee over 10, 20, 30 years, that can cost you sometimes a quarter of your, remaining balance. I mean, it's not cheap. So if you are going to an advisor, you want to make sure you're really getting the most out of it. And it should be, if you have some really complex business, maybe you own multiple businesses, maybe you have a complex estate situation that you need handled. Maybe you're retiring, or you own multiple homes, or you need help with tax advice. I don't know. There's a couple of different reasons, but those are just some off the top of my head. Usually thinking more complex, you might need to invest in that professional help. And as long as it's a good help, it's worth it. Can be worth it.
Gotcha. So you just think it's all about complexity of your assets.
Yep. If you have a real simple, if it's just you and you're working a 9 to 5 and you have a simple 401k, there is generally no reason that you need to hire an advisor.
Gotcha. Because it's kind of like an autopilot thing. You just put your money in and you just let it compound.
Exactly. Yep.
God, you know what? That really helps me understand this, because I do some financial coaching, and I don't really ever see a difference between a financial advisor and a financial coach. I actually have a financial advisor who comes on the podcast all the time. Shout out to Joey Snyder, my man. But he's awesome. He's very enlightening, and we love the same thing. So I never truly saw a difference in the two. But you're absolutely making sense, because I don't know nearly as much about taxes as Joey does. I don't know nearly as much about annuities as Joey does. I might know a little bit more about real estate, but that's not like a conventional long-term retirement planning kind of situation. As I mean, I don't know what I'm saying, Genevieve. So I'm sorry. So let's get into something I found fascinating on your page, which is this 12-step guide, right?
Yeah.
I know you probably saw this one coming. Can you explain, what that 12-step guide is and who does it apply to?
Yeah, sure. So if anybody is interested, you can go find me on Instagram. I'm at holistic.personal.finance. Somebody grabbed the name without the dots before I could. So that's just is what it is. And you can find my 12-step guides in the link in bio. And it is a really simple, almost like a checklist of things that you can do to build upon themselves to enhance your financial wellness. So the guide is really a checklist. And then the best part about it is actually the emails that come after it. So you get the checklist, and then after that, you'll be getting an email a day from me just for 12 days. And I'm going to go in depth on each specific checklist item. I also provide you with some templates so you can calculate your net worth. You can check out your cash flow. You can get those basics checked off. You can learn a little bit more about the basics of investment accounts and where you might be able to start. So you can really just get all the basic information down and get that ball rolling.
Awesome. First of all, I think that is genius. Because I think that a lot of times when it comes to personal finance, people are very easily overwhelmed. So if Genevieve sends me a checklist of 12 things, I'm like, oh God, how am I gonna deal with this? But when you follow up with 12 days of emails, it's so much. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's literally one day at a time. Today, I'm going to focus on this email. And that's what it is. That's phenomenal.
Thank you. And I do put in the emails a disclaimer that save them, because you don't have to do them all in 12 days. You do not have to do them all in 12 days, but save them so that you can go back and check each one off the list. And there is a kind of like challenge actionable item in each email. So challenge yourself to complete that like one actionable item with each step.
That is phenomenal. Of course, guys, she's going to link herself later in the podcast too, but I'm going to have the link to register for the 12-step guide in the show notes. I'm also going to have her Instagram and everywhere you guys can connect with her in the show notes, but we're going to link to that later, of course. So who is this 12-step guide for? Is this for that person who is living paycheck to paycheck? Or is this for that person who is behind on their bills or not even current? Or is this for a person who has a $250,000 net worth?
Yeah, it can kind of be for all three, but I would say if you are in a place in your life where you're one of two people, you're one, either feeling like overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I have 18 financial goals and I'm so overwhelmed just thinking about it. I have no idea where I'm going to start. Then this guide is for you. It's also for you if you maybe have recently made some changes. So I have a lot of clients that kind of come to me maybe after they've paid down a little bit of debt, or they've just got a new job and they're feeling like, okay, I have maybe a little bit more money coming in than I did before. And I know I am ready to like take this to the next level, but I'm just not sure where to start. Then this is also for you. So if you are feeling either overwhelmed with too many financial goals, or you are feeling like, oh my gosh, I just hit one and now I have no idea where I'm going to pivot to next, this is for you.
All right, Genevieve, I don't want you to give away the 12-step guide. Like I want people to actually go look for it. But can we just tease like the first step? Like let's give them a little bit of something to chew on that they're like, okay, maybe,
Yeah. So the first thing that I do with clients, and the first thing that's on the step, is definitely getting super crystal clear about where you are currently. And this can be really scary for folks. And I know because I've been there. I've been in the place where like, oh my gosh, I don't want to open up this credit card bill. I'm just going to like pay a little bit over the minimum and call it a day. Like, I don't even want to look at the bill. So this step is kind of forcing you to take a really clear look at your finances, go through all of your accounts, list out your assets, list out your liabilities, and figure out where to start. And it's also encouraging you to not judge yourself about that. So if you're in the negative, hey, you're in the negative. If you're at zero, you're at zero. If you're in the positive, you're in the positive. I care less about where you are. I care more about that you know where you are. And then now you have a really clear way to track your progress. So whether your goal is to pay down some debt, whether your goal is to invest more or to maybe purchase a home or an investment property or whatever your goal is, you now have a really clear way of tracking to that goal.
Wow. I think that is such an awesome first step, is kind of getting aware. I think, and I appreciate you with the disclaimer that it's going to be scary. It's going to be shocking. It is going to be very, very hard to do. And you're going to feel very overwhelmed when you do it. But no good comes from staying in the comfort zone. You have got to get uncomfortable with your current situation in order to make the change. And I also think that it's super awesome that you mentioned that this is your beginning point. Like, it doesn't matter. It truly does not matter. It
doesn't matter what it is.
Exactly. You can begin at negative $1 million. You can begin at $1 million. The fact that you begin is truly the point of this 12-step guide. And it's the point of this whole personal finance journey as a whole. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I hear it's kind of funny because it sounds so simple, but honestly, my feedback from clients is that this is like one of the biggest aha moments that they have, is when it is all down on paper and staring them in the face. And I will say most of the time, like 9 out of 10 times, they say, once it's all down on paper, it looks better than they thought it did. So if you're in that place where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to open that credit card bill, I don't want to list out all of my debts, or I don't want to list out, my savings account because I think I'm not saving enough or something like that, do it. And once you have it all down on paper, I promise it's going to look better than you think. And I think sometimes we're all our own worst critics, on that part.
I 100% agree. I think we all are our worst critic. And when you get it out of your head, because numbers in your head, they just don't go together. They all jumble together. Some numbers get bigger, some numbers get smaller. But once it's on paper, it is what it is. And so I 100% agree. Getting it out, getting it on paper, getting it in your notes on your phone, getting it into a budgeting app, and just being able to look at it, not think about it, but to actually look at it, is a completely different feeling. And again, you can feel one of two ways. You can, or I guess 3 ways. You can say, oh my God, I didn't realize it was this bad. Oh my God, I didn't realize it wasn't this bad. Or, oh, okay, this is exactly what I thought it would be.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll even have folks, look at their own net worth statement and say, well, if this wasn't you, if you looked at this and it was, let's say it's, I don't know, John Smith, and you look at it, what would you think about John Smith? And what are some good things? What would you say they're doing well? And you'd be surprised what, how that gets you out of your head a little bit. So try that trick if you're feeling anxious.
That is a great trick. Try to look at it from a third eye view. Yep. So Genevieve, what is your current, what is your wealth building path? How are you choosing to build wealth over time? Are you an index fund gal? Are you a real estate gal? Are you a business gal? Are you loving Coca-Cola? What does it look like for you?
All of the above. So I definitely am a firm believer in using your 401k. I plan on being a 401k millionaire, within the next decade for sure. So I am maxing out that 401k, maxing out that Roth IRA every single year. That is an absolute priority, no matter what I'm doing. Beyond that, building my business is a really big part of my financial plan, and just honestly a passion of mine. And I'm so grateful that I have the time to do that, and the opportunity to do that. And then my boyfriend and I have become real estate investors really in the past 5 years. And it's one of those things that is just another passion. We love it. So we just finished wrapping up on our second rental property, and it's already making a little bit of money. So we're feeling good about that. And we want to definitely have a portfolio of probably about 5, 6 properties, and to try to meet some of those cash flow goals. So those are our 3 main priorities.
Girl, you got your hand in a little bit of everything. I love it. Well, let me ask you this, because this is a big debate in not only the personal finance, but also the FIRE community, the financial independent retire early. There's a big debate about maxing out your 401k, locking up those funds. It seems as though you're doing both, to where you're maxing out a 401k for retirement, but you're also investing into real estate, which is income that you can use today. So
Yeah.
how did you decide on how much you're going to do to each? How did you define your allocation?
Yeah. So I think honestly, you just have to, I made maxing out my 401k a priority first. So that was just me personally. I wanted to hit that goal of that, 18, 19, depending on the year, $20,500 going into investments. And I think part of it, honestly, is because it's just automated and it's a little bit like mindless. Like I have it set up to where I am mostly in index funds, I'm in low cost accounts. I know what I'm invested in. I feel really good about it. And so both my boyfriend and I strove to make that our kind of like number one priority. And then also you're living on less naturally too, right? So once you take that out, what's left in your paycheck is what's left in. And then what we did is we really would save anything above that. So if we got bonuses at work, we would stash that away. If we made money in a different way, so like from this business, if I have a little income from that, I would stash that away. And I would say it took us about a year to save for the first one and probably another year to save for the next one. We were able to save enough money to go in on that rental property. So we prioritized investing first and then real estate second.
Gotcha. So Genevieve, I don't know if you know, but I love me some real estate.
Really?
Girl,
Yes.
oh girl. I got me a couple rental properties myself. So what made you dabble in real estate? What kind of piqued your curiosity in that asset class?
Rich dad, poor dad. Kind of. I say that half jokingly, half not. I think a few things. So one, I definitely knew, as much as I love my 401k, I also wanted to diversify, right? Because it's like, I mean, not crazy, but for me personally, just having that much in investments and then going on top and opening up a regular brokerage, to me, it just felt like a lot. Two, I always saw my parents did a lot of real estate deals when I was younger. So I think I kind of naturally saw like real estate as a way to build wealth and kind of how it worked for them. And I don't know, my mom always told me, like, if you buy real estate, you're literally like own a piece of the earth. And like, how cool is that? And I think naturally I'm a HGTV addict. So I just love real estate. I kind of like design and renovations and seeing that before and after. And I think it's honestly a really cool business to be able to be providing somebody a quality place to live. Like the world needs good landlords. I don't think there's anything bad about being a landlord. The world needs better landlords, right? Especially over the last couple of years. So I think all those reasons just kind of like propelled me into buying that first property.
Okay, and when did you buy that first property? When did you guys take the leap? Oh,
We,
well, before that, actually, I want to ask, how long was it from you got your inspiration, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you educated yourself? How long from when it sparked and when you guys actually took the first steps to purchase that first property?
I would say close to 3 years, 2.5 years, maybe. So, yeah, it took some time. You gotta save. We had to move, we had a job change kind of in between there. And then kind of once we got settled, we really focused. And, I would say for anybody who's interested, it really is all about like just taking action. You have to, if you're not, if you're not working with an agent, run some deals yourself, like get familiar with your market, all of those things take time. So it took time for us to do all of that.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
the reason I was shocked because like that's kind of short in the aspect of, you guys save for a down payment in 3 years. Like that's a pretty short amount of time. But the fact is, like, a lot of people think that I learned about it today, I need to take action on Monday. And although that may be the case, taking action isn't always picking up the phone and cold calling 100 people. Sometimes it's adjusting your budget to save more for a down payment, or even getting a good financial footing before you invest in real estate. That's all what I always tell people. Like, listen, like you shouldn't be trying to buy real estate on credit cards. That's not a good
Nope.
financial footing. So a lot of people think that purchasing the asset is real estate investing, but really there's a whole lot of preparation that goes up to it to prepare you to take that risk, taking a risk from a financial stability. So what year did you guys purchase your first property? And let's kind of run through it really quick. Like, was it a turnkey or numbers or?
Yeah, so we purchased our first property in 2019. It was, it's here so we're in New Orleans, so it's in the New Orleans area. And it's what we call here a double, but I guess what everybody else would call a duplex. So it has two sides. And it was just it's a great location. I'm always up for like an up and coming location. So if I see like construction trucks down the street, I'm like, yes, I want to buy there because we want that appreciation. And we did do some minor renovation work. So it needed some structural work. It needed some interior, kind of like a refresh. We did a kitchen refresh, and that really raised the value that we could rent it for quite a bit. So put a little bit of work into a little bit of our own work, a little bit of hired work. And that's been renting now ever since. And we have never had to make a mortgage payment. So that feels pretty good.
By never make a mortgage payment, you mean the tenants have never been late or not paid?
Yep.
Okay, so you mentioned you mentioned a pretty scary word first. Well, first of all, 2019, impeccable timing, I must say. Impeccable timing, because real estate from then to now has gone bonkers. So I want to put this out. But you said something very scary, and I'm going to be very vulnerable. It scares me. You said structural work.
Well, yeah, it was scary. I think it is location specific too. So you got to think here in our area, we have been hit with hurricane after hurricane. So this particular home was flooded during Hurricane Katrina, and that caused a lot of damage. And the previous homeowners did a pretty good job of fixing everything, but it just really needed more shoring up and cleaning up. A lot of what they did was probably not done by somebody who was a licensed contractor, probably done by a neighbor, which is very common for any Katrina hit homes, because at the time there was a shortage of contractors. So if you wanted your home worked on, really, you didn't have a lot of options. So not uncommon. So it's kind of funny when I say that because it sounds really scary, but when we put it into the context of where we are and the condition that homes are in here, it's not unusual.
Gotcha. So what did that structural damage look like? Was it like just water damage, cracked foundation?
It was foundational. So the home is raised. It's a raised home, as many homes are here, due to the flooding. And the pillars that it was raised on needed really a lot of shoring up. And the crawl space needed kind of more sand. And we also needed to add a retention kind of wall to prevent any further water damage that was going to come through. So those were the three kind of big things.
I'm gonna be honest, Genevieve. You're saying it like, yeah, it was just, the pillars are broken. I had to throw up a whole retaining wall and just add some sand. It's still scary to a lot of people, but that just goes to show that, you took a bigger risk than most people are willing to take. And by most people, I mean me. And I don't got no shame in it. I want to go out there and say, listen, I ain't got no shame. I'm not messing with foundation. I'm not messing with termites. I'm good. I'm not up to that much risk. I like risk, but not that much. But you guys were willing to take on more risk than the average investor would. And because of that, you guys have an amazing asset that I just know has appreciated like freaking blue cheese. And I don't even know if that appreciates, but I mean, you guys got a great asset and you took a bigger risk with a bigger ticket item. And I assume the reward was bigger.
Yeah, it definitely has been paying off. And we calculated it into the budget, like we knew we got a good inspection. We knew what it was. Obviously it always is more than you think it's going to be, but it wasn't out. I think we went over budget. I don't know, maybe by like $3,000, which in a grand scheme of a large budget is not unheard of. So we felt pretty good. We felt like we did okay.
So what you're saying is your first deal wasn't perfect. What a shocker. I don't think any of us had a first deal that wasn't perfect. And I think that's what a lot of people, that's what stops a lot of people. They're like, you know what, if it doesn't go perfect, if we go over budget, you know what, we're just going to die and that's it. The house is going to fall apart. But no, Genevieve just said she went over budget and the asset is still performing. That's the great thing about real estate. It is very forgiving as long as the location's right and you do your very best. And if you get close enough, let's just call it that.
Close enough. And you definitely learn. It's all a learning lesson. So I always say, like, if you're interested, especially in real estate, like, just be prepared to make mistakes. Like, no, you will make a mistake and it's okay. You'll recover for it. You'll learn from it. It's all right. And we've had 2 hurricanes since then, unfortunately. Right. So we were like, oh, wow, we didn't plan for that. Had a lot of damages for both storms. And even still, with all the damages, with all the repairs we've had to do, with changing of tenants and things like that, we've still never had to make a mortgage payment.
Gotcha.
Out of pocket.
So Genevieve, you buy your first property, it's getting beat up over the years and you went over budget on the repairs. So obviously this scared you so bad. You got your butt kicked so bad that you went out and bought another property.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So let's talk about that one real quick. What was your second property? How did you get into that one?
Yeah. So as we were saving more, and once the first rental was kind of a little bit more stable and things are quite stable, we have great tenants in there now. That matters a lot. Do your due diligence on tenants. We thought it would be really fun to do a short-term rental property. So we knew that was our focus and took us a while to figure out where and what location. We knew we didn't want to buy another property in New Orleans because of all the storm damage and just kind of being a little bit fearful of that. Insurance rates here are doubling. So cost of living's going up and we wanted to go out of state. So, so we decided to go out of state. We ended up settling in Pittsburgh and bought a single family home there and didn't need as much renovation. Structurally, it's over 100 years old, so it's been standing there a long time and didn't need quite as much work. More cosmetic. So we did some cosmetic updates and furnishing, which was a lot more expensive than we anticipated as it goes. But yeah, ended up spent a month up there furnishing, doing the cosmetic updates, and just put that on the Airbnb and VRBO mid June, and it's rented out actually every weekend until October. So we're happy about it.
That's awesome. That's so great. So you've dabbled in long-term rentals and now you're dabbling in short-term rentals.
Yes.
Which one are you liking better? You can be honest.
I would say if I was giving advice to somebody who was new to buying investment real estate, I would say the long-term rental was much easier to set up. It's much easier to manage. It's less day-to-day. You might have some day-to-day stuff like to start off with, but it's a faster setup. And it's a little bit of an easier ride. However, I think maybe not right now, but I think long-term Airbnb and short-term rental is going to produce more income.
Yeah, there's been a quite an obvious influx of investors going towards short-term rental because, of course, the higher profitability. I haven't dabbled in it yet, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to dabble in it in the future. But I see why. Like it's not like a crazy concept to me that they choose the higher profitability with a little more work over long-term rentals. But of course, with uncertainty and regulations coming to more areas, we don't know what's going to happen. So
yes, a lot of regulatory changes coming when it comes to short-term rentals. So if you are interested in that, definitely do your due diligence. That was one reason why we chose the Pittsburgh market, is because they don't have any regulations right now. So, maybe that will probably come in the future. So we're prepared for it. But at least right now, getting started, we didn't have the added stress of having to apply for a license or pay a large tax or a fee to the city or state. So that definitely went into the equation.
yeah, and then two examples that come to the top of my head for the listeners out there who aren't aware. For example, in places like Las Vegas, you actually need to operate it under the same regulations of a hotel. So you need to have fire plans, you need to have these posted signs, and all of the rules that a hotel has, you need to also follow those rules. And it can be very tedious, especially if it's like a single family home, or or even it's not generating that much profit. The work is much more. But also the Atlanta market. Atlanta just hit short-term rentals really, really hard, to where I believe you're only allowed to have 2 in the whole Atlanta area. And I think 1 has to be a primary residence. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, guys. I just read headlines, I read articles, but I know that it's coming down, especially in these bigger markets. So it's something to be cautious of, but it's not something to cause you to do nothing. So,
right. Yep. And we have the same thing here in New Orleans. So that's another reason why we decided to stay away from this market. The regulatory environment here for short-term rentals is really, really strict. I mean, they have a whole task force just to like go out and check your property and like fine you if you are in violation of any of these rules. So yeah, it's a pretty strict business. They're not short-term rental friendly.
yeah, but I really want to commend you for looking and studying these things, because a lot of times people won't. They'll just say, that's a good property, I think that rent out well, I think people would love it, and they buy it and they realize, oh, the reason that it was being sold is because there's no more short-term rentals. And so that's
Right.
always something to look into. So it's really great that you guys studied your own market, you studied your backyard, and you realize we're not going to be able to do what we want here, so we're going to go somewhere else. So Genevieve, what do you have any short-term goals that you hope to accomplish within the next 6 months to a year? I think that you mentioned earlier you guys want to buy another property.
Yes, we definitely do. I think that will probably be another year. It's going to take us some money to save, some time to save up for that, for that next big investment. So really that was our big goal for this year, was to secure our our first short-term rental, or second rental property total. And we kind of check that off the list. So really for the next year, it's just all about saving, right? Saving back up for that next big investment. Continuing to build up my business, continuing to kind of use those automations. And for me, because I love personal finance, I'm always looking to, learn more and educate myself more. So I'm currently in a CFP program. So for me, it's about finishing that up and brushing up on my skills so I can better serve clients too.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you're a lifelong student, and you mentioned a CFP program, which is a certified financial planner,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. See, I'm not too
You're
bad
good.
at this. I'm not too bad at this. All right. I'm 2 for 2.
Oh yeah,
baby.
finances. We love our acronyms. I've been in the business long enough to know that it's all about the acronyms, right?
Yeah. But I also want to point something out that I did very quick math in my head, so it might be wrong again. But you mentioned earlier, from the point that you found out, like, you know what, real estate might be a good thing, to purchasing your first property was 3 years. And now between 2019 and purchasing in 2022, it's only been 2 years since that property. And now you're about to purchase another property, hopefully within the next year and the year and a half. So it seems as though I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but it seems as though you are starting to experience that compound effect of increasing your income with your jobs and also increasing income with these properties. Am I hitting the right ballpark there, or?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So the goal is to actually get maybe about 5 or 6 income producing properties. And eventually what we'd love to do is to actually take a break from work. The goal is to take a break from work in the next 5 or 6 years so that we can travel and see where we want to land next. So, but before we can take that break, we got to build up these income streams first.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of creating passive income that you can live off of, and then experiencing life, traveling the world, and using those properties that are creating income while you're sleeping to fund that lifestyle. I think that's awesome. That's, of course, what I think most people are striving to do, especially in this financial independence space. So that kind of, you kind of stole my thunder with the next question, which was, what are some of your long-term goals that you hope to accomplish within the next 5 to 10 years? And what does the finish line look like? So you just mentioned getting to 5 to 6 properties that are going to be producing enough cash flow, and hopefully quitting a job and traveling for a while. Is there anything else that you guys hope to accomplish? And what does the finish line look like for you, Genevieve?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a question mark now. So, that is definitely the plan in the next 5, 6 years. I'd love to be able to take a break from work and travel. And then from there, it might mean we really love living a particular location and we live abroad for a few years. Or I just am looking for, when I think of financial independence, kind of what it means to me, it's all about like that flexibility and having options. So, if we have family that we need to care for, maybe it's coming back and being able to have the flexibility of not working a full-time job so I could care for a loved one in our family. Or maybe it does mean living abroad for a few years and experiencing life in a different country. So I think after that, it's really going to be a bit of a question mark. It could even mean like going back to work and having, I actually do like my job. I'd love to have a break from it, but I do like it. So, maybe it means going back to work or building this business even more. So really a question mark kind of after that time period.
Yeah, and look, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people say that the finish line is always moving. It's always moving. So not knowing where you're gonna end up it's kind of a good problem to have, honestly.
Yeah, it makes life exciting. Nobody wants to know the exact end. You gotta, gotta just ride the wave.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Genevieve. So we're going to go into the last question of the podcast. And of course, I ask these same questions to every single guest I bring on. Are you ready?
All right, let's do it.
Question number 1. Everyone has their own definition of what it means to have financial peace. What is your definition?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I love the idea of having financial peace. There is a big portion in the book Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. It kind of talks about that, like finding that contentment and how hard that is to find. But when I think of financial peace, I really think of like finding a place where you are content. And I think that's really hard. I don't think I've found that place personally right now, right? I'm still like chasing for more, chasing for that more income, finding more independence, so expanding my life and kind of what that means. But one day I hope to achieve it.
That's a very interesting choice of words that you use, the word content.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of said you don't really know what that looks like for you. Do you think that that's something that you don't really know what it is until you stumble upon it? Or do you think that some people will never be content?
I definitely think, and he touches on this in the book, but I definitely think there are people who are never going to be content. And I hope that's not me. I hope I can find that contentment. I just know I haven't found it yet.
So do you associate contentment with satisfaction?
Yeah, I think contentment is a place where you can finally say, like, kind of say, I'm good, I'm good on this level of income. I don't need, I'm happy here. And I think, although we can be happy really anywhere, where the striving to get more and more and more just kind of really slows down.
Gotcha. I'm gonna follow up again because this is a very, like I said, it's a very interesting choice of words with the word contentment, because I think that also means a lot to different people. And there's a lot of people, especially it seems like in this financial independent state, that they want to strive to be the best, or they want to strive to be their best. They, okay, how can I say this without sounding redundant? They're never happy with where they are. They're always striving to be better. Do you think that might cause an issue for some people, to where, because like okay, I'm gonna be completely honest, I am that guy. I always think there is something I can be better at, and so I can always be improving. So I personally think I will never be content.
Oh, I feel you, because I'm the same person. But when I think of really financial peace, I think of really being in a state of life that I don't have to strive as hard. Maybe you're still improving on yourself, maybe in personal areas. I am going to be a forever learner, but where you can feel really happy with the income that you have now, and you can feel content in your life, and that you have the flexibility that you want. And, you don't need anything really beyond that.
Gotcha.
Or you can start to enjoy what you have, I guess, maybe is another way to put it. We spend all this time in life, working hard to accumulate assets. So it's always important to, think that there's going to be a time where you can truly, truly settle and truly enjoy the hard work that you've been putting in for years and years.
Gotcha. And by the way, these aren't any of the other questions. These are just follow-ups for this, because it's just, I don't know. Nobody has ever used that word.
Really?
So it kind of, it sparks so many different questions.
Oh, man.
So I'm a firm believer that there are some people that will never be content, and I think that we can agree on that. Do you also think that there are going to be people who unfortunately can never be content, or can never reach that financial peace that you're talking about, that unfortunately they will never get to a point where they can enjoy the fruits of their spoil?
Oh, I've seen it happen. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, working in a retail bank for many years, I saw many older people come in who thought that they would be covered by Social Security, that thought Social Security would be enough, that had to go back to work. And I've even had people in my own family who have had to do that. And it's hard to watch and hard to realize.
Yeah, I agree. And when I think about it, it kind of gives me the drive to continue doing things like this, having these conversations. That's why, your page is so important because, if you can help it, if I can help it, I want everyone to experience financial peace at some point. I want everyone to experience that contentment, and I want everyone to experience the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, no matter what you're doing, if you're working, whether you work for yourself, whether you work at home or work, like as a homemaker, I mean, whatever you're doing, you're working hard. So at some point we want to be able to enjoy all of that.
Gotcha. I'm so sorry for going so deep into that one. It's just
that's okay. I can't believe I'm the first that said when I think that's the first thing that came to mind.
No, I love it. It's such a great concept, and I think it's going to resonate with people. So, question number 2. That was a long question one. Okay. If there are listeners out there that want to start building wealth and they have no clue where to get started, what would you tell them?
So I would definitely kind of reiterate some of the things that we talked about in our conversation today and calculate that net worth, get it down on paper, because once you see it on paper, you can figure out what's the next thing to prioritize, and that will give you momentum.
I love it. And it's all about momentum. We just talked about your compounding effect. It's all about Brandon Turner from the Bigger Pockets. He made an analogy, and it was just like, it's like personal finance is kind of like a train, right? When a train starts, it's going like 1 mile per hour.
Yes.
And it is exerting, so much fuel just getting rolling. But once you get to 1 mile an hour, it's a little bit easier to get to 2. And then it's a little bit easier to get to 3. And before you know it, the train is going 70 miles per hour, and there is nothing that can stop it. Personal finance is exactly the same when it comes to momentum. It's all the hardest part is getting started, and then it kind of just gets easier and compounds going forward.
I love that. I'm stealing that analogy.
Oh, I see it. Hey, look. Yeah. Okay. Question number 3, Genevieve. If there's one thing you could advise everyone to avoid doing to build wealth, what would that be?
It would be comparing yourself to somebody else, which is hard. That's not an easy task to do, but is the one thing that will bring you down on your journey. But the good thing is that I feel like it does get easier with practice. It gets easier with time. And the reason why it's such like a detrimental activity is because it really does steer you away from your own journey. And it puts you on somebody else's. It's like we're all in our own cars driving our own race. And the minute you start comparing yourself to somebody else, you're getting in their car and you're going where they're taking you, not where you want to go. And sometimes you don't realize it until a couple miles down the road. And you're like, what am I doing? I am in the wrong journey. You need to get back in your car and you need to focus on your own drive and where you're going. Secondly, it's just not really fair to yourself, when you're looking, and this happens a lot on social media. I feel like there's probably more pressure now than there ever has been. You're looking at somebody's outsides and you're really comparing them to your insides when you really don't know what's going on inside their home. And that's just not a fair comparison to make for yourself.
You're absolutely right. It's not fair. It's not fair for you to compare your whole life, all of your ups, all of your downs, all of your good, all of your bad, to their highlight reel.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So question number 4, if there's someone out there that doesn't believe that they can reach financial peace due to their age, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., what would you say to change their mind?
Okay. First, I hate that this is a question, but I get why it is, right? And I really think that this is why we need more representation of people doing finance in the world. So just like a quick side note, you know, in my career in the private bank, I was one out of two females in a group of about 15. So pretty low representation there. Of about 20 to 25 advisors that worked in our area, there was one woman and one person of color. So that's it. So I understand why looking in, it feels so unfamiliar. It feels like, you know, finance isn't made for everybody. And I really hate that. It just drives me absolutely bonkers, to be honest. But I would say if you are feeling that way, just know that where you are now, where you start, it doesn't define like where you're going, right? So, and I would also say, you know, investing isn't scary. It's not risky. It's just unfamiliar, you know, because we're not taught about it in school. We're not taught about it as we're growing up. And then the second thing I would say is to start small and focus on like one thing at a time. I think some of the biggest mistakes I see people make, and we've kind of mentioned it a few times here, is that you have 15 different goals. You see somebody 20 years ahead of you, even 5 years ahead of you, who may be 30 steps ahead of you, and you're trying to compare yourself to that person and do all of the things all at once, and you're just getting overwhelmed and derailed. You know, start really small. So save $10 a week, focus on paying off one credit card, just one, pick one and focus on paying off. Focus on opening a retirement account and, you know, investing $25 a week, whatever it is. So really start small and start focused, and then you'll start experiencing that personal finance train momentum that we just talked about. And you will take off, and where you are right now doesn't define where you're going to be in 20 years.
Yeah. And just for the record, I also hate this question. I hate that I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
But I have to ask it because I know that there are people out there that need the answer to it. A lot of people have imposter syndrome. A lot of people have self-doubt. And a part of this podcast is dispelling that. That's why I bring on women like you who've experienced, you know, being in a segregated group in the finance world, or me being a Black male, or, you know, someone who's gay and has to deal with those obstacles, because you're going to deal with obstacles that I don't have to deal with. And I'm going to deal with obstacles that, you know, a gay person might have to deal with. And we all have our different obstacles. So at least pointing them out, recognizing like, listen, this is going to be difficult. This might be a little bit more difficult for you than it is for me. You know, me being a man, it might be more easier for me to go into the finance with a bunch of other men, but it's harder for you. But it's I think that it has to be talked about. Otherwise, you know, this podcast is just for people like me, and I don't want it for people like me. I want it for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that's also why, you know, creators who are in the finance space are really important, because I think it's so nice that we have so many different faces out there representing, you know, personal finance and our own journeys and making mistakes, but overcoming mistakes and finding success and being able to celebrate that success. So thanks for putting yourself out there and doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. Genevieve, this has been such. We have gone way deeper than I thought we were going to go. This has been such an amazing conversation. I appreciate you being so open and willing to talk about, you know, a lot of these different things, because, you know, I think it's a conversation worth having. But with that being said, where can people find out more about you?
Yes. So thank you for asking, and appreciate you having me on. This has been a fun chatting with you. So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. My handle is at holistic.personal.finance. And again, I have that awesome 12-step guide you can download. The link is in my bio. And you can also learn more if you want to learn more about one-on-one coaching, what that looks like. If you want to hear from past clients, you can find all of that out at holisticpersonal.finance/coaching. And you can, I'm sure that'll be in the notes somewhere.
Absolutely. I will add all of those to the show notes. You guys aren't going to have to go far. You're not going to have to type in all those dots and spell out holistic because it definitely took me a second, but I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But again, Genevieve, I really appreciate you coming on. Oh, by the way, guys, I'm going to have Psychology of Money and Rich Dad, Poor Dad linked in the show notes below. You guys can purchase because those are two absolute banger of a book. So,
yeah, must reads.
But Genevieve, I really appreciate you coming. I can't express my gratitude because this conversation has gone way further than I thought it would, and I am truly grateful. And I hope to have you on in the future once you've hit that sixth mark, and you might be traveling in Bolivia or wherever your journey takes you. So,
would love that. Would love that. Thanks again so much. And what you're doing again is just really important to the full community, and I'm glad that people have access to listen to conversations like this.
I 100% agree. And what you're doing on Instagram, muy bien. Keep it up. Okay. All right. Awesome. You have a blessed rest of your night, Genevieve.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. And guys, that was my interview with Genevieve. Man, oh man, does she talk about a whole lot of different things. I mean, looking at the notes, we talked about how she started working at a super early age. She was able to negotiate wages at an early age. These are all things that if you teach your children, this is going to be a compounding effect for the absolute rest of their life. If you teach them young how to negotiate wages, how to figure out if you're earning properly, how to approach the conversation, these are things that are going to stick with them and they're going to evolve throughout their entire lifetime. So she is just an example of how when you start early, you end up getting a compounding effect for the rest of their life. So if you do have children, I suggest you start them working early. Teach them how to negotiate wages. Teach them how to start investing, of course. We talk about that all the time. So we also discussed Genevieve's 12-step guide. She gave you guys a little teaser. So if you guys want that, it's going to be down in the show notes, and it's also on her Instagram where you guys can get that full 12-step guide to tackle your finances. I mean, Genevieve brought the fire. It was such a great conversation. So I really hope that you guys got something out of it because I know I sure did. I love bringing on people from all walks and backgrounds to not only share their money story, but hopefully inspire you guys. With that being said, I already mentioned it earlier, guys. If you don't mind leaving a review on the podcast, wherever you listen, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever it is, it truly helps out. If you guys want financial coaching from me personally, one-on-one, you guys can find that on my website, www.genzmoney.com. You guys can schedule it on my calendar. All of that is down in the show notes below. If you guys want to get in touch with me, reach out to me on social media, guys. I am always prepared to answer any questions you guys have and to get your life started. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to get up out of here. I really hope you guys enjoy. My name is James Bowman, and always remember, you're only as secure as your ability to perform. So spend your life accumulating assets that can perform for you. Later, guys.